As Olwen settles into the Moon River Pack and her relationship with Alpha Landon deepens, how will she handle the sudden revelation of her ex-boyfriend Darren's betrayal? Can Olwen and Opal find their place at the upcoming Evergreen Packs event? Curious how Olwen finds her place in the pack? Hit subscribe and don't miss any updates. Chapter 9 Integration. If there was a word to sum up the reports on Olwen Adams that Alpha Landon received from Gamma Josh, it would be spotless. Other than familiarizing herself with the Moon River Pack's various amenities and atmosphere, there was nothing Olwen had done to make others wary of her. When Cassidy and Josh had started spending time with her in an attempt to get to know their new packmate and worm out any possible secrets the she-wolf could have, they found none. The young lady was practically an open book, and once they asked about the events that had brought her to the pack, Olwen straightforwardly laid out the full story, stating she had accepted what had occurred and was okay with others knowing. She became a frequent visitor to the bakery, but not to extract secrets from the parents of the beta. She initiated easy and enjoyable small talk with the older couple as she waited for her orders, hearing their stories of their younger days while she told them of her best friend and younger brother, the former of whom had almost become her second in command. Jasper and Nicole were now quite fond of Olwen, and curious indeed to be introduced to the almost beta she spoke encouragingly of. All this conversation about Stella made Olwen a little wistful. She considered finally giving her friend a call, but decided to leave her phone off. Aside from still being unsure about what was happening in the Silver Arrow Pack now, she didn't want to appear as if she was spying on their behalf. Beta Elijah, who'd already sympathized with her story, had established a friendship of sorts with Olwen. They both liked to read, though Olwen spent more time reading up on the history of wolves and their packs, while Elijah, having been taught these all his life, preferred adventure, fantasy and the odd romance novel. He insisted on hiding that final detail from Alpha Landon, given that love up until recently was a bit of a sore spot for his friend. On day 3 of her stay here, Olwen had seen a notification from the Evergreen Wilds from the Silver Arrow Pack was having their Alpha, lunar and marking ceremonies all that day. Delta Cassidy had held her close, a reassuring arm on her shoulder as Olwen finally and truly came to terms with the fact that Kylie had taken her place. "Don't think about it anymore. Your place will be with us," Cassidy assured her, as Olwen looked up and gave her a small, sad smile for what could have been. And Cassidy was right. Olwen's place was now with the Moon River Pack. The official integration ceremony was a more well-attended affair than Olwen had thought. The Silver Arrow Pack rarely accepted new pack members, with Kylie being an exception since she'd been from the pack beforehand, but as Olwen entered the field where the ceremony was to take place, she was sure there wouldn't be so many other people here to see her if they'd done a similar event back there. Wearing a simple sky blue dress and with her hair tied into a ponytail, Olwen was taken aback by the cheers and applause that went up from the other attendees as she approached. As she walked down past the rows of benches that had been put out, she recognized many whom she'd talked to since getting to the Moon River Pack. Wolves who'd started out wary of her but were now excited to have her as a fellow pack member. She also saw Beta Elijah, Delta Cassidy and Gamma Josh all seated near the main platform with their families, all of them smiling at her warmly and cordially. And Alpha Landon, who stood at the platform with his hands clasped. He was trying to keep his expression neutral, but as Olwen neared and stepped onto the platform to face him, she saw the hint of a smile and a flash of adoration in his blue eyes that made her heart flutter slightly and Opal swoon. As soon as the noise died down, Landon spoke, his voice ringing out through the night air. "Olwen Adams, do you swear to devote yourself to the happiness, prosperity and peace of the Moon River Pack?" "I swear." "Do you swear to look out for your packmates no matter the situation, even with your previous ties?" "I swear." "Do you swear to protect the Moon River Pack with all you have?" "I swear." "Then I congratulate you officially, as Olwen Adams of the Moon River Pack." More applause and cheering erupted as Alpha and Ida blew a ribbon around Olwen's wrist, and she looked up at her new Alpha with a warm, grateful smile. "Thank you, Alpha Landon." The man nodded at her, and Olwen felt her cheeks start to flush before she had to break their gazes and head back off the platform. As a now official member of the Moon River Pack, Olwen spent the next hour or so talking with others before Delta Cassidy approached her with a clearing of the throat. "So Olwen, is your wolf ready for her integration?" Olwen could feel Opal jumping around excitedly inside her and nodded. "She's more than ready." "Great. Come on. The site is ready." Olwen followed Delta Cassidy to a patch of forest just outside, a number of attendees to her integration ceremony following behind and alongside, chattering with excitement. Betty Elijah had explained to her that the integration process for a wolf would involve more activity, where she would have to wait for all the other participating wolves to hide before setting out to look for them. It was almost like hide and seek, except this was also an opportunity for Olwen's wolf to become used to detecting the scents of her new packmates. Delta Cassidy wished her good luck, and Olwen sat calmly down and waited as everyone shifted and disappeared amongst the trees. She closed her eyes, breathed in and out, and then once the bell rang, she shifted. With the blue ribbon still tied securely around one of her paws, Opal bounded into the forest in front of her. While Opal had never been the strongest or fastest wolf, her best skill even before her lunar training had been her sense of smell. Even if a wolf were to roll themselves in mud or something far more pungent to mask their scent, Olwen and Opal could still identify who it was under all that. When Opal and Star ran together, no matter how hard Star and Stella tried to conceal themselves, the latter's blackberry and lemon scent was something Opal could always pick up on. Opal found most of the regular pack members with no issue. A couple of the younger wolves were crouching in bushes and on the lower branch of trees, and the silvery grey wolf went closer and lightly boo-ped each one as a means of elimination. Opal crouched to help some of the more adventurous ones down from the trees, and turned to make sure they were all right as the crowd of found pack members grew. The more mature wolves were located one after the other, most of them having tried something to conceal their scent, but not really succeeding in Opal's view. "Most of the participants have been found. We're just missing the higher-ups," Olwen assured Opal. A familiar wildflower scent reached Opal's nose, and after some sniffing, she looked up to see a reddish-brown shape in the trees above and howled to signify her find. Cassidy's wolf Cerise huffed, seeming a little disgruntled she'd been found but impressed nevertheless as she leapt down from the branches and landed on the forest floor delicately, trotting away to join the rest. The scent of lemongrass and citrus took her to find Josh's wolf Janus, having concealed himself behind a rock with a heap of dead leaves. The rust-colored wolf took the opportunity to bat lightly at Opal's snout before he conceded, then left his hiding place. Elijah's wolf Ellis had chosen to hide in a hollow tree, attempting to use his pelt and some mud to camouflage into the bark. He bowed out more graciously than Cerise and Janus, dipping his head before moving out of the way. And, as he did, Opal almost jumped as Elijah's voice spoke to her. Olwen and Opal's new mind link to the Moon River Pack was working. "Your new Alpha isn't far from here. Were wolves allowed to give up hints like that?" No matter, that familiar scent had permeated her nose long before he had spoken to her. Opal stalked further along the lake, following the forest scent. It was near but muted at the same time, and led her to a patch of lily pads on the water's surface. The she-wolf narrowed her eyes, bending her head closer to see the slightest hint of a nose behind one of the flowers. There was a loud splash as the sand-colored shape emerged from beneath the plants, and even when she'd known he was there, Opal took a few steps back in surprise. She could only stay put as Lark heaved himself out from the lake and shook his fur, some of the water splashing onto Opal's pelt. Instinctively, the silvery grey wolf lunged at Lark, and despite him being much bigger than her, he was knocked onto his back far too easily. Perhaps he was either caught off guard or let himself be knocked over. Opal snorted into his face and lightly shook her pelt, flicking the water droplets back onto him in retaliation. Once that little moment of victory was over, however, Olwen realized how close they were to Locke. Even when she wasn't in complete control, she could feel her heart pounding as she stared into Locke's yellow eyes. She could feel his breath on her muzzle in that wonderful forest, while scent engulfing her, and it almost made her dizzy. And then Locke leaned up and licked Opal's nose, surprising them both. Olwen regained a bit more control of Opal to pull back, feeling shock and affection bubble up in her as Locke got to his own paws. Despite the sandy wolf letting out a soft whine, he didn't dare to look at her as he headed past, their pelts slightly brushing. The sight of Opal and Locke emerging from the trees prompted cheers of excitement and joy from the others, who had shifted back and fortunately not come close enough to witness the moment they'd just shared. That was impressive, Olwen. Beatty Elijah grinned to her, averting his eyes like everyone else as she swept a cloak over her bare body once she'd shifted back. Your wolf has quite the sharp sense of smell, and you have such a beautiful wolf too. One of the other pack members exclaimed. Olwen blushed at the praise and dipped her head. Thank you. Her name is Opal. As the people gathered around her, chattering happily and all sorts of questions about her wolf, Olwen caught sight of Landon finishing getting himself redressed. He happened to glance her way, his blue eyes meeting her grey ones before he quickly turned away and left without looking back. Welcome to your first day of training, Olwen. I hope you're prepared. The morning after her integration ceremony, Delta Cassidy indeed kept her promise to Olwen and summoned her to the training center via Mind Link. Olwen was already prepared in sporty attire and fitted with headgear and gloves, curious and anticipating what Cassidy would do for their first session. She'd been using the training facilities since she was allowed in this pack, but all she could do was practice how Beta Caden had once trained her to fight. So you know the drill. Show me some of what you already know, so I know what to teach you next. Delta Cassidy motioned to a dummy that was in the center of the room. Take your time to get ready. Trying not to feel self-conscious from Cassidy's eyes on her, Olwen went over what she knew, delivering a series of punches and kicks to the dummy. Cassidy observed her for a few minutes before nodding and approaching the dummy. You can stop now. Not bad, but it seems you're relying a lot on attacks and force. If someone were to sneak up on you, you'd be wide open. Olwen rubbed the back of her neck. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Opal, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Yup. It's not your fault though. I think it's a fighting style that your former pack has stubbornly adhered to for decades. Cassidy shrugged. If you were a big-sized alpha or beta perhaps it would work, but such a form wouldn't favor an omega. Olwen's face fell for a moment. Oh, so here's what I'll have you focus on. You need to figure out how to use your unique traits as an omega to your advantage. Olwen's eyes flickered back up to her with interest. Advantage. Whenever the subject of gazer came up back in the Silver Arrow pack, the term was synonymous with subservience. Someone that was like a glass figure, precious and beautiful, but also easy to break. There was no way an omega would be capable of getting an edge over another wolf in a fight. But after she'd started her lunar training, Olwen had hoped to break through that stereotype. There is always a lurking assumption about gazer, that they are these pretty little dainty things that always need protecting. Cassidy stated, stepping around the dummy and approaching Olwen. But this is a good thing. They'll underestimate you and let their guard down, and that's when you can catch them off guard. How well, first things first. Why don't you pretend to be an enemy wolf and try to attack me? Olwen shrugged, lunging at Cassidy and attempting to swing her fist into the woman's jaw. At last minute, the woman ducked out of her path, moving past her and pulling her down by her foot as she did, causing Olwen to fall face first on the mat with a muffled grunt of surprise. Gazer are usually smaller in size, which means they're lighter on their feet. Cassidy explained, helping Olwen up with an amused grin on her face. As long as you're quicker than the opponent, it doesn't matter how big or strong they are. She stepped back, getting into a fighting stance. Now I'm going to pretend to attack you, and you're going to have to try to dodge. Olwen nodded, and as Cassidy purposely came at her in slow motion, she tried to mimic what she'd seen the woman do earlier and turned to one side to avoid her fist. Then not bad. You got some of it down. But you need to angle your feet in the correct way so that when the time really comes, you can pivot faster. Olwen listened and allowed Cassidy to adjust her into the correct stance. They practiced that same, seemingly simple maneuver again and again, until Olwen was absolutely sure that she had it down. When Cassidy moved at full speed, Olwen felt her fist just miss her face as she dodged it. You're quite the fast learner, the Delta remarked with an impressed look in her eyes. Keep this up, and you'll become an expert fighter in no time. But don't think that I'll only be teaching you how to fight in your human form. You'll learn how to shift in between your wolf and human self as you fight. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Olwen nodded, wiping the sweat from her forehead. She'd spent the entire first session perfecting her dodge, but she felt no less accomplished. She briefly wondered how the Silver Arrow pack was still the strongest pack in the Evergreen Wilds, especially if all warriors in the Moon River pack were being trained by someone like Delta Cassidy. She then recalled that while the packs had endured the rugged acts those years ago, it had been ages since the last truly physical conflict had emerged between the top two packs. It was a reason the Olive Branch Festival had been in place every year they had. It was one more year without fighting amongst the packs of the Evergreen Wilds. Would there come a day that Olwen would have to fight for her new pack up against her old one? No matter who it was, she swore to herself that she would be ready by then to take them on. Chapter 10 Attraction. After cooling down and taking a shower, Olwen was eating in her new home. She'd been moved in after her integration ceremony, and was still in the process of decorating her space. As she finished, Gamma Josh spoke to her through the mind link. Go to the Alpha's parents' house once you're free. They requested to see you. Wearing a grey polo t-shirt and jeans, Olwen left her home and cycled to where Landon's parents stayed. Josh had pointed it out to her during one of her first few days in the pack, but she hadn't really seen or talked to Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright yet. As she knocked on the door of the house, she briefly prayed to the moon goddess and hoped she hadn't done something to tick off the Alpha's parents. The woman that answered the door had dark hair with small wisps of grey, but kind blue eyes like Landon's. Hello, Mrs. Cartwright. You and your husband wanted to see me, Olwen asked cautiously. Why, yes. We wanted to finally meet the newest member of our son's pack. Landon's mother smiled and stepped aside to allow Olwen to enter the house. I'm not sure why, but my son wasn't too keen on us meeting with you so quickly during your first week here. Despite her words, Olwen caught the teasing glint in the older woman's eye and felt the blood rush to her face. Even if Landon hadn't said it out loud, his parents probably saw right through him. Well, it's nice to meet you finally, Mrs. Cartwright. I'm Olwen. Wonderful to meet you, Olwen. And please, no need to be so formal with us. I am Holly, and my husband, whom will be down shortly, is Wendell. Olwen shook Holly's hand, surprised by the firmness in it. But then again, what did she expect from an Alpha's mother? Ah, Miss Olwen, you're here. Landon had definitely inherited his father's dirty blonde hair, as the older man approached and shook Olwen's hand as well. It's a pleasure to welcome you. I heard about what happened to you in your previous pack, and I apologize on behalf of all Alphas. Alpha Bradley is as prideful as he's stubborn. Surprise flickered through Olwen's eyes. She'd seen how Alpha Bradley had interacted with the other leaders at the function, and everyone looked polite. On the surface, at least, because no one wanted to offend the alpha of the strongest pack in the forest. Well, come in. We must talk. Hallie spoke with a warm smile. Olwen had a strangely comfortable conversation with Wendell and Holly for the next half an hour, considering who they were. They didn't address how she ended up at the Moon River Pack, instead sharing random anecdotes about recent events. The two older adults were keen to hear about Olwen's experiences in her new environment and how she found her integration ceremony, of which Olwen carefully avoided mentioning anything about the little moment Opal and Lark had. Before Olwen was about to leave, however, Carly passed her a plastic-wrapped box. "Oh yes, we were hoping you could help us pass this to our son. He should be in his office about now." Sure. Olwen managed, glancing down to find that she had been handed a box of tea. She'd seen a mug of chamomile sitting at Landon's desk the first and last time she'd been to his office, so that made sense. The two nodded brightly, knowing all too well what they were doing. "Thank you, Olwen. We'll see you around," Wendell said with a grateful smile before they closed their door and Olwen left, clutching the box. Cycling up to the building, Olwen located Alpha Landon's office fairly easily. Passing by the main rooms and down the corridor, she relaxed upon receiving his forest after rain scent, only to tense up again as the sweet smell of vanilla and honey reached her too. She'd smelt it before. In fact, a few days ago, during the integration activity with Opal, it had belonged to a small cream-colored wolf she found crouching amongst some bushes. It was a pleasant scent, but right now it made something inside of her curl. She knocked on Alpha Landon's door. "Come in," came his voice. Olwen opened the door wide, seeing a young woman with platinum blonde curls and green eyes getting up from the chair opposite Landon's desk. The Alpha himself was attempting a neutral expression, but Olwen could recognize the surprise and yet relief in his face the moment he laid eyes on her. As for the young woman, her eyes reflected dismay and some amount of irritation. "Your parents wanted to pass you this," Olwen said, trying to ignore the envious feeling gnawing at her stomach as she held up the box of chamomile tea. Landon stood up, heading towards her just to accept the box. "Oh well, I'll have to thank them later, but thank you for bringing it over. Olwen, could you stay for a while more? There's something I'd like to talk to you about." He lightly pushed across another box of chocolates to the blonde woman. It appeared to be some kind of present, wrapped neatly with a bow. "For the final time, I'm not interested in your gifts. Please go and save it for someone else. And if you keep coming back here again, I'm going to have to ask Beatty Elijah to ban you from this building." Elise opened her mouth to say something, but as her eyes met with Olwen, she closed it. She nodded to Landon, looking a bit more embarrassed before she retrieved her chocolates and left, closing the office door behind her. "Who was that?" Olwen asked Landon curiously, as she turned back to the desk. "I mentioned a lot of wolves in my own pack have been trying to win me over," Landon replied, unwrapping the tea box and placing it in a drawer. "Elise is by far the most persistent. I'm grateful my parents sent you here. I was prepared to have her escorted away." That name definitely rang a bell. Olwen felt Opal groaning a little and hushed her. "I take it you said you needed to talk to me as a way to get a leave." "Oh, not really. It did help to get her to leave, but I did actually want to talk to you," Landon assured her, beckoning her to sit down. "Oh, what did you want to address?" Olwen's mind flashed back to the small interaction between their wolves a few nights ago. "I hope your new residence is to your satisfaction," Landon spoke, fixing his eyes on her. "And that no one in the Moon River Pack has been giving you trouble." "Yes, my new place is perfectly fine. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But manageable for one person like me. Olwen told him. And ever since I came here, everyone has been at least civil or polite towards me, even though I'm not originally from your pack. Landon nodded, looking as if he was searching her eyes for any sign of discomfort before relaxing when he found none. That's good to hear. Can I ask, how are you and your pack adjusting so well? I would have thought the rogue at Axe a few years back would have made everyone wary of me. Even if I once was from another pack, Landon nodded thoughtfully, leaning back in his chair. The rogue at Axe dealt quite the blow of our pack. We're lucky that we didn't lose more of our own. People are still very much weary, but I try not to let it cloud my judgment. That every rogue outside of this pack is not to be trusted. That's why we have the increased security and monitoring in place if someone wants to stay in the pack. That's a surprisingly mature approach. Besides, a rogue saved my life once. Olwen looked up at Landon with surprise and interest. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Landon nodded. It was years earlier, when I was about 13, I think. I just shifted and had gone on a run. I got carried away and went a bit further beyond the Moon River Pack borders, and I found myself lost. Olwen quietly listened to the Alpha tell his story, envisioning Lark wandering around in the trees helplessly. And then this stranger found me. I could tell from his scent he was a rogue, and as a newly shifted son of an Alpha, I was scared. I thought he would kill me or try to kidnap me, but he didn't. He guided me back near the entrance of the Moon River Pack, where my parents found me. They wanted to find and thank him after that, but we never really did find out who he was, huh? Olwen nodded thoughtfully. Rogues were usually believed to be uncivilized wolves, those who had perhaps at some point belonged to a pack and had been cast out for committing a sin, or those who were born in the wild. Especially after the rogue attacks, where many of them congregated into a group of their own and tried to usurp the established Evergreen Packs, this belief only intensified. When Olwen had become a rogue herself, she'd never stayed around to interact with members of other packs because she knew she wouldn't have been a welcome presence. Perhaps I'll never know whether he had motives or not that day when he found me lost in the forest, Landon said. But I'd like to believe he was one of the good ones. Aside from me, I hope. Olwen supplied in an attempt at a light-hearted joke. She didn't have the time to feel embarrassed as Landon chuckled a moment later. I guess you could say that. Landon paused before he spoke again. Are you comfortable spending time with just me like this? I know I said I would have extended the same offer to you even if I didn't have any interest in you, but... No, I'm all right, Olwen assured him. Actually hoping I could get to know you better a little now that I'm part of the Moon River Pack. It feels a bit strange that I don't know a lot about my new Alpha yet, when my last Alpha very nearly became my father-in-law. Liar, Opal teased in her head. You're more interested in him than you think you are. Olwen. Please don't. Olwen pushed Opal to the back of her mind for now, but deep down she knew she was right. Well, if you say so, then ask me whatever you wish. Olwen, if I can answer it, I will. Landon calmly poured a kettle of chamomile tea for himself, the aroma filling the office. To begin with, why do you like drinking chamomile tea? Olwen settled on, inhaling the fragrance. Oh, it started after I began my Alpha training. And after, Rianne. A look of sadness passed through his eyes before he continued. I was in a bad place for a while. I felt the weight of my future responsibilities as Alpha crashing down onto me, and I had convinced myself that without a mate I wouldn't be able to lead the pack. I started pushing too hard, overworking, punishing myself for not being good enough to keep my mate around. It got so bad. I finally got myself drunk one night and just collapsed in my office. Mine and Elijah's father, the then Alpha and Beta, found me out cold and had to carry me back home. It was humiliating for me since a number of pack members witnessed it all. Olwen couldn't help her astonished reaction. Given how put together Alpha Landon seemed, she couldn't imagine him in such a state, though she knew just as much that assuming a leadership role for one's pack was never a smooth sailing journey. When I woke up the next day, I felt worse than I ever had in my life. Landon recounted, his expression showing nothing but shame. I had to drag myself out of bed with a pounding headache and felt queasy the rest of the morning. I finally realized after talking to my parents and Elijah, who was my childhood friend and still training to be Beta back then, that what I was doing was only making things worse for myself. With their support and encouragement, I started to give myself room to breathe, to take a step back and look at everything. The man inhaled gently and continued to speak, his tone affirming as if he was still addressing himself. Rianne rejecting me and leaving the Moon River Pack was not my fault. It was her choice, and even if I had tried, she might not have changed her mind. And regardless of whether I had a fated mate or not, it wouldn't impact how I would do as an alpha. He smiled softly, and there was no regret or wistfulness in his face this time. It took a while, but I moved past it. I became the alpha of the Moon River Pack, and I have been for the past few years. My mother stayed as Luna for a while, but eventually I got used to doing everything myself. She deserved to have a comfortable retirement after years of supporting my dad. Olwen felt a rush of admiration and fondant, more so than previously. Oh, and also I've never really drank alcohol that heavily since, he admitted. At most 1 or 2 glasses, but not beyond that. I started out drinking chamomile as a way to calm myself down, but I guess I got used to the taste, so now I just drink it for fun. Olwen cracked a smile at his choice of words. That's a surprisingly heartfelt backstory for something like your choice of tea. It is what it is. Landon shrugged. Next question. Do you have any hobbies aside from drinking tea and warding off admirers? Landon smirked, amused by her choice of words. In fact, I do. Several. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Opal. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I play several types of sports. Elijah and I were part of the soccer team when we were kids. His eyes gleaming with pride at the memory. We also used to race with our other friends in the river near the pack borders, so in some ways my wolf and I are just as used to the water as the land. Theft. You don't need to tell me that. Olwen recalled the way Opal had found Locke hiding in the water at initiation, and quickly shoved away the memory before her thoughts could drift further. Fortunately, the Alpha didn't seem to notice. Did you get the opportunity to swim a lot back in your old pack? Olwen ruefully shook her head. No, not for long periods of time. At least. And if you want, I could help you out. The Alpha offered with a warm and somewhat shy smile. You've got to become more used to water if you're part of our pack. Our pack. Olwen was sure that wasn't the first time she was hearing that phrase, but she couldn't help the soft fluttering inside her from the way Landon said it. And the implication that he wanted to bring her swimming himself, not delegate the task to one of his subordinates. She felt a slight blush on her face. That would be great. Thank you. Alpha Landon. What about you? What hobbies do you have? Olwen. Landon was now watching her with an expectant but patient look on his face. He was about a foot taller than her, could come across as imposing to anyone at first glance, but sitting here in his office talking to him like this made him a gentle giant. A capable yet warm alpha who was genuinely interested in getting to know her. Even when Aaron had started courting her, she didn't remember him showing this much interest in her as a person. Gently folding her hands in her lap, Olwen smiled back warmly. Despite her wolf already getting eager from the clear attraction Landon had expressed for her, Olwen hushed her again. Perhaps Landon was better than Aaron or his father, but it was still too soon to rush into a relationship without knowing more about the Alpha. Heck, she thought she knew Aaron before he started his affair with Kylie. Don't rush, and don't think about Aaron, she assured herself, as she began to share hobbies with Landon. Maybe eventually, I can give someone else a chance. Chapter 11, studying a few weeks later. I'm impressed it took you this long to come to the sickbay, Dr. Enzo remarked, wrapping a bandage around the now medicated gash on Olwen's shoulder. Most people who spar with Delta Cassidy for the first time end up far worse than this. Olwen winced as she felt the medicine settle into her wound with a slight stinging sensation as the bandage was fastened. I did train with the Silver Arrow Pax Beta for a few years. I came prepared. Maybe. The doctor nodded, finishing up before he stepped back. You might want to wait on that wound to heal before doing any training again, though. It shouldn't take long since it's not a major injury, and your wolf should help speed up the process. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Thanks, Dr. Enzo. Olwen hadn't met Dr. Enzo until a few days ago. He'd been away from the Moon River Pack attending medical school. But even though he was young, in fact slightly younger than her from what she remembered, he definitely had a good head on his shoulders. The first time Olwen had ever witnessed blood in person was when the first wolf in the Silver Arrow Pack was killed by a rogue. She couldn't remember who it was, an older woman she supposed, but she'd remembered the way her then 9-year-old self had reacted upon seeing the body. That sight had haunted her mind for days after, to the point where she refused to sleep alone and needed her parents to stay by her bedside. She hoped that Dr. Enzo would not have to face such things, and if he did, that he would take it far better than she had. Olwen walked back to her home this time round, greeting the members that called out to her as she did. It was a common sight now to see Olwen heading to the training center each morning at least 3 or 4 times a week, and emerge exhausted after a few hours-long session with Cassidy. She had progressed quickly under the Delta's guidance. After mastering dodging different forms of attacks, Cassidy had upped it further by showing her how to take down her attacker after evading them. There were many options that in the end were whittled down to 2, stay in human form, or shift into your wolf. Opal was more than happy to take control for a while and train with Cerise. Olwen and Opal had always cooperated on most fronts, but having to coordinate the pivotal moments to shift when facing an opponent on the field was a new challenge. It was exactly that shifting one moment too late that gave Olwen the injury she had just gotten treated, and Cassidy did warn her it would have been worse if it was an actual enemy. Aside from training in combat, Alpha Landon had actually followed through on his offer to take her swimming in the river near Pack borders. Sometime after their initial conversation in his office, he'd summoned her with the mind link. She didn't consider her time spent with him in this manner to be as rigorous as Cassidy's training, but Landon was still the alpha of Moon River Pack, consisting of wolves whom all had been accustomed to water and swimming from a young age. And Olwen had to admit to herself that she wanted to impress Landon. The two of them knew very well there was something between them, and in her case, Olwen had to rein Opal in somewhat to prevent her from becoming too eager. And by the moon goddess, did it get more difficult each time. Being in proximity with Alpha Landon, whether just staring at him up close or a slight contact of skin or fur, made her flustered. When she'd first met him a year ago, she'd already noted he was quite handsome, except back then she'd not pursued it further than that fleeting thought due to her mate bond and what she thought was her perfect, loving relationship with their aunt. Now it was like Olwen had forgotten what Aaron's scent was like. Even just catching a whiff of Landon's scent made Olwen's head spin. It was still just as comforting as it had been the first time she'd scented him. But now it evoked a reaction from her that felt dangerously close to the way she felt the first time she'd realized Darren was her fated mate. But it couldn't be. It feels like the mate bond, but at the same time it's not quite. What does it feel like to you? I describe it like that. Opal responded, just as confused. His scent makes me alert and excited, but I don't recognize him as our mate. Yeah. Olwen frowned to herself. He can't be our fated mate. Wolves only get one fated mate in their lifetime, and ours was Aaron until he betrayed both us and his wolf. Even if this thing with Alpha Landon progresses into something more, he won't be a fated one. I know, but it's like, Opal wondered aloud, it's like the more time we spend with him the stronger our ties to him are. The conversation shared with Landon that day, and the brief small talk since had only increased her respect, admiration, and yes, interest towards the Alpha. He'd formed a natural camaraderie with a lot of his pack mates growing up, explaining why even after his mate's rejection and the low point he'd hit, he was still able to lead them so well. Olwen had seen enough of Alpha, Bradley and Aaron to know they didn't spend time with their pack mates that way. They carried themselves as if the rest of the pack were beneath them. But Landon wasn't feared the same way she realized Alpha Bradley had been. He was feared in a way, but his pack members also looked up to him. She'd come to know the many things Landon had done for his family, friends and pack over the past few weeks, and it only strengthened her impression of him. She'd also seen Landon training if they were in the center at the same time, and his physical strength and skill were both impressive. The day she'd seen him, he'd knocked over several dummies within a span of 20 seconds. And he doesn't look too bad like this either. Opal had said aloud as Olwen's eyes had landed on Landon's muscles at some point, sending her some very inviting and not quite family-friendly images. Olwen had turned betrayed and immediately hurried away to find some water, secretly shoving those images away for another time. And that day in his office, when Landon had asked her about hobbies, Olwen had responded honestly. She had enjoyed flower arranging cross-stitching, but had gradually given them up once she began her lunar training since she was informed they were distractions. She couldn't be this open around Aaron as he'd remind her to focus on what was important. Landon had immediately frowned at this, even more so when she told him it had been a year since she'd last touched a stitching needle. So after their last swim, he had immediately steered her to a small craft store and informed her that giving herself to the pack did not constitute giving up things that she loved. I can't imagine the kind of alpha Aaron is. The kind of pack environment he and his father are encouraging if what you tell me is true. I swear by the moon goddess that I wouldn't have asked the same thing of you if you were to become her. Landon had immediately stopped short and scratched the back of his neck. Apologies, I'll leave you to it. He had grunted in a hurry before turning and leaving, robbing Olwen of the chance to ask him to stick around so they could talk more. So part of Olwen's daily routine also now constituted of a plethora of things she'd left behind when she was training to be in the flower arranging, cross-stitching, crocheting, baking. The only hobbies she still retained that hadn't supposedly impeded on her lunar duties were reading and dancing. Honestly, Olwen hadn't realized how stifled she actually was back in the Silver Arrow pack until now. She had felt accomplished with each training session she completed, each pack matter she helped address, but she missed the feeling of peace and happiness that just came from arranging a nice bouquet of flowers for her dining table. Soft pink, pale blue and yellow roses, with a few sticks of lavender, all courtesy of Jackson. He'd been a bit quiet the first week she was here, but once she'd gotten back into flowers and started buying from the shop, he slowly opened up to her the same way a flower would. They bonded over their shared hobby, though the moment Olwen brought up his mate, she saw the smile on Jackson's face and instantly knew that even his love for gardening and flowers paled in comparison to that which he held for Delta Cassidy. And the mini-projects didn't stop there. She made her favorite macadamia and white chocolate chip cookies, crocheted a blanket, and was now in the midst of working on a cross-stitch pattern of opal, which now also had to be put on hold due to her injury, but no harm done. Olwen supposed she deserved a rest. Opal snorted as Olwen checked on the heart stitch when they arrived home. "I'm not that fluffy," she huffed. Olwen snorted, tracing her fingers over the half-done image with a smirk on her face. "Shut up. Haven't you looked in a mirror or lake recently?" In the moonlit pack, Olwen felt free, as if she'd grown wings and had the very essence of life injected back into her veins after a long time. All thanks to Alpha Landon. Turning on some quiet music, Olwen headed to her bedroom. Sitting on the dresser, untouched since the night she'd left the Silver Arrow pack, was her phone. She hadn't wanted to burden or be in contact with anyone from her old pack when the pain of Erin and Alpha Bradley's betrayal was still fresh, but she couldn't deny even after so long that a part of her mind was burning with curiosity. She unlocked the phone before she could stop herself, and instantly a trillion notifications appeared. Most were negligible, except for one thing from her call log. 30 missed calls from Stella, 10 voicemails. Olwen's mouth dropped at the sight of it. Stella's calls had been sporadic throughout the past 5 months based on the records, and the last had come in just a few days ago. Settling down on her bed in her pajamas, Olwen hesitated for a moment before deciding to check the latest voicemail. With bated breath, she hit play. "Olwen, I hope you're safe, even though you're unreachable." Stella's worried yet hopeful voice came through the phone. All at once, Olwen felt small tears prick her eyes at the emotions in her friend's tone. Stella. She believed Stella would have moved on and remained under now Alpha Erin and Luna Kylie, but the fact that she'd still tried to reach out to her after so long was proof that Stella did care for her, she hoped. "How do I say this? I tried to give Kylie a chance. I did, but things in the Silver Arrow pack just got worse and worse after you left." Stella spoke in the message, sounding defeated and yet scornful. "I didn't stick around to see her lunar ceremony, but the sort of leader Kylie is going to become is definitely not a good one." Olwen frowned, and even Opal poked up in interest. "We left before we could talk smack about Kylie with Stella." Opal snorted. "If she's going to roast that woman in a recorded message, I want to hear it." Olwen rolled her eyes. "I'm sorry if this is too sudden for you. If you ever hear this message." Stella spoke apologetically, "But Erin and Kylie didn't tell you everything. I overheard Darren and Alpha Bradley talking, and I got Kale to hack into Erin's email account. He has emails to and from Kylie dating from 2 years ago." Olwen's heart sank, immediately knowing what that meant. "I don't know when exactly it started, but Erin was already cheating on you with Kylie before she left for the Snowfang pack." Stella was clearly fighting to keep her voice level on the call. "They struck a deal that she'd break up with Oliver and come back to the Silver Arrow pack if Erin broke up with you and made Kylie his Luna." Olwen had no idea how it happened, but suddenly her knuckles were clenched in the bedsheet. She'd already known that Kylie was the one who'd rejected Oliver thanks to the word circulating amongst the other packs. But Erin. "But don't worry, you got the ball rolling when you chose to exile yourself, and let's just say, helped tip over the next domino. Long story short, everyone in the pack knows what Erin and Kylie did. And I left the Silver Arrow pack too, with my brother and mother." Olwen sat up, her eyes wide in disbelief. As if anticipating her reaction, Stella's voice came again with a soft chuckle. "Don't blame yourself, Olwen, after what I found out. I can't bring myself to stay and become the pack's beta anymore. For a pack built on loyalty, it seems to enjoy rewarding traitors. That and when Alpha Bradley found out where the emails had been sent from, he attacked Kale." Stella's voice darkened at this, and Olwen could picture her normally brown eyes flashing to stars galactic indigo. If no one had stopped him, my brother might have. But anyways. She inhaled, pondering her next words before speaking. My family and I are on our way to the Moon River Pack. We're hoping that as the second strongest pack in the Evergreen Wilds, they'll be able to do something about the Silver Arrow Paxka and Alpha and Luna. If they're going to lead the packs in this region, it spells nothing but doom, wherever you are. Stay safe. There was silence in the bedroom as Stella's message sank in. It all made perfect sense. Why Aaron went behind her back with Kylie, and why he agreed with his father to replace Olwen with her as Luna. Thucking. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Logan. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Finally, Opal growled from within her. Olwen got up and paced the room, just trying to restrain herself from punching something as the blood pounded in her head. How many times did he lie to my face and say he loved me? That I would be his perfect Luna, before he went behind my back with Kylie? How many more times did he sleep with her around the same time as he was sleeping with me? Olwen thought of the sight she'd walked in on, of Aaron and Kylie tangled up in what was supposed to be their bed together, and wanted to throw up. How many times more had they done the deed in that bed and she hadn't known? He should have told me if he didn't want me. That dog. Pun intended. And Aaron must have drugged ours more than we thought. Olwen felt nothing for Aaron now but disgust and hatred. And if her quits were anything to go by, Opal felt the same. An Alpha Bradley knew Kale didn't have the means to defend himself against an Alpha Wolf. Bradley's a monster. Opal growled again in her head. First he kicks you out of the pack and then he tries to kill his own beta's son. Beta and shouldn't have stood for that. Olwen very much knew she hadn't obeyed Cade and being brought up in Stella's message, and he hadn't come with them, but that would be a story for another day. Quite literally. Since Stella had mentioned she and her mother and brother were headed for the Moon River Pack, Olwen act down and slowly inhaled and exhaled, trying to calm down her agitated emotions and thudding heart. She didn't think it was a good idea to call Stella back as much as wanted to, but she could imagine the surprise on her friend's face when she arrived at the Moon River Pack and found Olwen already there. The reasoning she'd given for immediately driving all the way across the wilds with her family to this pack seemed logical, but at the same time, a strange coincidence that Olwen had gotten herself established in the same pack a few months prior. What exactly had Kylie been doing back in the Silver Arrow Pack that made Stella so repulsed by her? How had an Alpha Bradley, Beta Caden, Delta Jace and Gamma Edric reacted to what Aaron and Kylie had done? How were the rest of the pack? Olwen had no idea how far Stella was from reaching the Moon River Pack, but all those questions could only be answered then. Chapter 12, Growing. So I'm not quite sure when, but as you heard, Stella is on her way to the Moon River Pack with her brother Kale and her mother Sylvie. Olwen spoke, looking at the four in the Alpha's office with her. You can search my phone if you need, but I haven't had any contact with her since I left the pack. She doesn't know that I'm here, and this was the last voicemail she left me. Olwen had deliberated telling the authorities before deciding that since she knew, it was better to preempt the arrival of more former members from the Silver Arrow Pack. Firstly, she didn't want her friend and her family attacked for having ill motives. And secondly, if she held back this information, she doubted it would look good on her behalf. She just hoped Stella would understand. To assuage any doubts, she played the voicemail for Landon. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Logan. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Cassidy and Josh as they were gathered in the former's office. So Stella, Cassidy began thoughtfully, still absorbing what she'd heard. She was training to be beta back in the Silver Arrow Pack until, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Logan, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. From the sounds of it, Olwen nodded. If she'd stayed in the pack, she would have been appointed beta after the ceremonies were over. That makes sense, Damage muttered. He was looking up the announcement of the Alpha, lunar and marking ceremonies on the Evergreen bulletin on his phone. The bounty in this post is still named as Beta Caden Anderson. Yup, her father. And my first trainer. Oh, Delta Cassidy said with a snort. Sounds like the man has less of a spine than the rest of his family. Olwen wanted to disagree, but kept her mouth shut. She didn't know what had happened between Stella and her father yet after all. So Stella's brother hacked into Alpha Aaron's mail and unearthed the messages. Beta Elijah commented aloud. Olwen shrugged and nodded again. She was trying to calm her nerves and not see this as an interrogation, though she was by all means still the newest member of the Moon River Pack and had only been here for a month or so. I don't put it past him to know how to do that. He left the pack for a few years to study programming, and he's a natural hum. You know, if what you say happened really did, he could be a useful addition to our pack as well. Damage remarked. Olwen. Everyone quieted at the sound of Alpha Landon's voice, who was facing her in his desk, his gaze serious. I understand that these people are close friends of yours from the Silver Arrow Pack, and as such we will keep a lookout for them and will not treat them with hostility when they arrive. But I'm sure you know that this will have to come with certain agreements, especially if things go south. Olwen nodded, her face just as solemn. I understand. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Firstly, if they intend to stay in the Moon River Pack, they would have to undergo the same initiation phase that you went through. No special favors. And secondly, concern flashed in Landon's blue eyes. If something goes wrong, you're aware that your position in the pack could be jeopardized. Olwen nodded again with all sets of eyes on her. I'm aware, and I'm willing to take that chance. If Stella really is coming to us for some kind of help with the new Alpha and Luna of the Silver Arrow Pack, this could be something. Cassidy remarks, leaning against the Alpha's desk. The Silver Arrow Pack has been the uncontested leader and representative of the Evergreen Wilds packs for years since its inception. Yes, Alpha and uncontemplated the situation before he spoke. There hasn't been a challenge in years between packs, and the last time it occurred decades ago, it resulted in the death of the Moon River Pack Alpha. Olwen knew that too. The last Alpha to challenge the Silver Arrow Pack's position was Alpha Morrison. And while he fought bravely, he was no match for Alpha Edward, Aaron's ancestor. Morrison ended up bleeding to death after refusing to surrender. But if the Silver Arrow Pack remains the strongest with Alpha Aaron and Luna Kylie, I can't imagine what direction they'll take the rest of the packs in. Beta Elijah pointed out. Perhaps we'll wait until Stella and her family really arrive here that we'll receive more details. Olwen suggested. Alpha and nodded, but the look of determination in his eyes gave away what he was thinking. If it really came down to it, Landon would have to take on Aaron of the Silver Arrow Pack for title of strongest Alpha in the Evergreen Wilds. He hit Opal, Nog huffed, pacing around agitated, lie in Landon's mind. He's driving his own pack members away. He cannot be what represents the packs of this region. We will have to train more, prepare ourselves for what could come. As Cassidy, Elijah and Josh talked amongst themselves, Landon's gaze fell back on Olwen. She was dressed in a simple collared tee, shirt and jeans, her pale brown curls falling nicely around her shoulders. His heart stopped the moment he looked into her eyes and saw the resolve there. All at once, her lavender and honey scent came towards him, despite the presence of 3 other people in the room. Lark was suddenly jumping up. Olwen and Opal smell wonderful. Why haven't you Too soon. Lock. Landon had to break his gaze from Olwen's before taking a random file from his desk and pretending to be busy. I get it's been years since Raina and Rianne, but we can't just jump and mark the next wolf we have an interest in. But she clearly likes us. Lark whined, his sandy tail wagging. Landon sipped his chamomile tea again and sighed, leaning back in his chair and massaging his eyes. She's still new to the Moon River Pack, and I'm not going to push her. Plus now we have all this coming our way. I swear to the moon goddess Lark, if you can't control yourself, I'm going to have to thin any. Lark snorted, trotting to the back of Landon's mind and sitting there. But do not let this wolf go. Landon sighed inwardly. Ever since Olwen had joined the Moon River Pack a month ago, Lark had become increasingly difficult to rein in around her. When they'd gone swimming together, even just light brushes sent tingles through his skin and sent his wolf into a frenzy. He'd have to submerge himself in the water just to clear his head for a moment. Olwen Adams had definitely made the Moon River Pack a better place since she'd arrived, even if she didn't know it. A lot of the pack members enjoyed talking to her thanks to her easygoing and humble nature. It was common knowledge now that she had originally been intended to assume the leader position of the Silver Arrow Pack, and one could see the effects of that training on her. She played with the younger children more than once, settled minor disagreements between people, and adapted quickly to her new training under Delta Cassidy. The Delta herself had reported on Olwen's progress to him. She was still having trouble picking up some more complicated techniques, but her willingness and desire to learn more than made up for it. Jasper and Nicole saw her at the bakery almost daily and spoke fondly of her, as did his own parents, who clearly knew their son had his heart set on the new girl. It had been much to his embarrassment that he'd heard how his parents had invited Olwen over to their home more than once to discuss random topics with her, though she didn't appear to mind. Not to mention, since the day Olwen had come upon he and Elise in his office, the latter had finally stopped bothering him. It had taken him showing an interest in another woman for Elise to back off. And once Olwen had gotten back into her old hobbies, it was watching the color return to her face and the energy to her body. He'd admittedly noticed her cycling to and fro with various flowers, art supplies and baking needs in her basket, and saw the bright, enthusiastic smile on that lovely face. It wasn't just that she was recuperating to full health again now that she was no longer a rogue, she was genuinely happy. If she really did become the Luna of this pack. Landon's mind was suddenly flooded with a series of dreamy images. Him and Olwen standing on the porch of his home, watching the sunrise with his arm around her. Lark and Opal running together in the forest, their pelts brushing. Her and Olwen lying in their shared bed, their legs resting on top of one another after, not again. Bend ungroaned and buried his head in his hands before pushing that final image away. See? We both haven't seen any action in for years. Lark huffed. You want Olwen and Opal too. Olwen and the rest weren't in his office anymore after he'd dismissed them minutes ago, and yet that sweet floral smell was still wafting in the air like a cloud and making his mouth almost water. He didn't recall Olwen's scent affecting him like this when she first come here. And for sure, he couldn't concentrate on anything else now. And so, Alpha Landon headed off to the training center to prepare for a potential confrontation in the distant future. He trusted Olwen, hoping for both their sakes that she was right about the motives of her friend. It's been a month since you got here. You need to find an elegant, nice dress to wear for special events. Olwen didn't have time to protest or argue before Gamma Josh dragged her towards the pack boutique the moment they set foot out of the office. She would have thought the wolves would start being wary around her again after she'd informed them of some of her old packmates coming here, but on the surface it didn't look like anything had changed. There's definitely something in here that you should like. Josh pointed to the racks of dresses. Olwen's mouth dropped at the sight. These dresses looked so expensive, for lack of a better word. Beautiful, but costly from the materials put together to make the piece of clothing. She glanced at the name of the boutique and then at Josh. Isn't this a bit too? Josh snorted and waved away her concerns. You can consider it an integration present to yourself. Olwen didn't bother to tell Josh that she'd been accustomed to the idea that home gaze didn't contribute to the overall well-being of the pack aside from needing protection and bearing children most of the time. Aaron hadn't openly expressed this idea, but come to think of it, while they dated, Eddie took her out shopping. It was never to places this pricey. If she was looking for a fresh start away from all that, why not follow her gut for which dress she would want for once? Olwen nodded slowly. Okay, Josh, I'll take a look around. She poured through the racks, Gamma Josh by her side, patiently awaiting her selections and also giving some feedback where he thought appropriate. They had just passed by the third rack of dresses when Olwen turned the corner first and found herself face to face with Elise. Miss Olwen, the other woman managed, nodding with her eyes diverted elsewhere. Olwen hadn't observed Elise enough during their last meeting, but now that she saw the young woman's posture, gentle speech and her sweet scent, Olwen realized that Elise was in no mega much like herself. But right now, any possible camaraderie between them was squashed by the memory that this was the same Wolf who was pursuing Alpha Landon. Elise, fancy seeing me here. Olwen managed a polite, warm smile. Another portion of her lunar training had to be to learn how to socialize and present oneself in public settings, including when you were faced with someone you weren't particularly fond of. Yes, you must be Olwen. Given the look Elise had shot her back in Landon's office a few weeks ago, she seemed to be doing a pretty good job herself at hiding her dislike for the newcomer. I'm surprised it took you this long to come to this place. Are you trying to impress Alpha Landon by any chance? Knowing that Elise was attempting to get a rise out of her, Olwen kept the smile on her face and her tone level and calm. Well, no. I spent the past month getting settled, and now that I decided to check out this store. Besides, given what I've heard, shouldn't I be asking you that question? She saw the way Elise swelled a little from the embarrassment, but to the girl's credit, she didn't retaliate with hostility. Actually, no. The annual Evergreen Packs function is coming up in a number of months, and I'm looking for a suitable dress that Betty Elijah would like. She replied with a proud smile on her face. Olwen did not remind her that the Evergreen function was normally only attended by the current and or future alphas, Lunas and Betas of each pack, not to mention her very slim chances of Elijah somehow picking her as his +1. Best of luck to you. Olwen didn't know if that was polite or sarcastic coming from her. Thank you. Best of luck to you as well. As Elise took a dress off the racks and headed into the changing room, Olwen turned to Gamma Josh and frowned. No wonder I haven't seen Elise trying to approach Alpha Landon. Whatever she's trying to do, Elijah is as much of a lost cause to her as our Alpha. Josh responded with shrug and exasperated sigh. You know him. He only wants his fated mate. He never bats an eyelid other she-wolves. That much Olwen knew. Given the mate bond had worked out so well for his parents, and with what had happened to Landon and his own fated, it seemed to only make Elijah more determined to get it right when his own mate finally came along. Olwen didn't see the beta in a romantic way, but, whoever his mate was, they would be quite the lucky individual. So, Josh cleared his throat. Any dresses you're interested in? Olwen surveyed the area, quickly picking out a few dresses that had caught her eye. These all look beautiful, but there's just something missing. What about that one? Olwen and Josh both turned at Elise's quiet voice. She was pointing to a organ that had been hidden behind one of the dummies. Olwen's eyes flickered to Elise before she went over to fish the dress in question out into her full view. The organ was silver, with sheer puff sleeves and bodice. Glass beads embellished the top half of the dress, scattering down just below the waistline. As skeptical as Olwen was about whether Elise was attempting to sabotage her, she had to admit the dress was beautiful and suited her preferences exactly. It was reminiscent of that of a princess, and while the sheer parts would show a bit of skin, the overall outfit would still come across as modest and elegant. "Why didn't you go for this dress?" the woman asked curiously, seeing the rose-pink one that was currently folded over the other's arms. Elise shook her head. "It's beautiful, but it doesn't suit me. I just thought it might be something you like given what you usually wear." "Oh, and the silver of the dress reminded me of Opal." She didn't wait for Olwen or Josh to say another word before she turned and headed away to the cashier to pay for her own dress. They both watched her pay for the rose-pink dress and leave the store before looking down at the silver dress in Olwen's hand. "Whatever she's up to, the girl's got a good eye," Josh said, taking a step closer and looking over the dress more carefully. "I think it would fit you too." Looking at the beads that were embellished into the top of the dress, Olwen knew she had to handle this one carefully. "To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Opal, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Go try it on, I guess," she managed, bringing it into the room. After 10 minutes of very carefully lacing up expensive dress, Olwen stepped back out wearing it. She didn't need to ask Josh how she looked because his face said it all. "This dress looks perfect on you." Walking around and surveying her from all angles just to be sure. "You could throw on a simple chain necklace or some diamond earrings and you'd be good to go." Olwen couldn't help a shy smile that came onto her face as she lightly swished the dress around. She'd already checked herself in the mirror before exiting the changing room, and she had never felt more confident than she did in this. After purchasing the dress, a pair of matching heels and earrings, the two left the store to visit the rest of the shopping areas. If what your friend from the Silver Arrow pack mentioned is true, then this year's Evergreen function might be quite the tense one. "Gamma," Josh remarked softly. "Alpha Landon will need quite the support." For a moment, Olwen felt a pang of guilt. Still leaving the Silver Arrow pack, coming here to ask for support against Alpha Aaron. This had all started when she'd chosen to exile herself. "I hope he's not feeling pressured or anything. That's not what I meant," Josh assured her. He stopped walking and came in front of her. "I'm saying that you should keep this dress for a special occasion. No offense to Elise, but..." A mischievous look came onto the gamma's face as he grinned at Olwen. "Between you and her, you have a much better chance of attending the Evergreen Packs function this year." The video ends here, but the story goes on. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.